you for joining us this afternoon on Let's Talk Well-being, Productivity, and Achievement of Dreams. Thank you for your patience. If you have any questions or comments that are relevant to what we're discussing this afternoon, you can type in the comment section. Joining us this afternoon is Patton Musendo. He's a lawyer, speaker, and author. Thank you for joining us, Patton. Yes, as a lawyer, do you specialize? And maybe you may want to tell our audience whether you specialize as a lawyer. And also, in the answer, you can just tell us what well-being means to you as a lawyer and maybe to your clients.
Thank you so much. Well, myself as a lawyer, I don't specialize exactly, but I have a few areas that I focus more on. These include estate planning, transfer issues like property transfers, drafting of constitutions, and family trusts. I focus more on those, but I wouldn't say I specialize. I just have a trust that I work on. In terms of well-being myself, the way I look at well-being is more to do with being in a good state mentally, physically, socially, financially, in every key area of life. But in terms of my work with my clients, I consider well-being as being having their legal needs met. Unfortunately, I have no authority unless allowed to delve into the personal lives and issues of my clients or into their private spaces, except to the extent that I'm allowed. So their well-being for me, it is when the legal needs they have, which prompts them to engage me, have been met successfully. Sorry, I'm muted. I can't hear you.
Thank you. I just realized. Yes, thank you for that, for making it clear that from a law point of view, well-being is when your legal needs are met, and because sometimes, as you mentioned, normally people talk about well-being like in a general perspective, like spiritually, physically, financially. But I like the idea that you reduced it to your field. So next time, if someone consults a lawyer and their needs are not met, then it means there's an issue for a client on their well-being. You have to make sure that your needs are met. June 16 is Youth Day in South Africa, and generally the month of June, people celebrate youth. And I understand you work with youth, and you've also written a book, Dear UP. I'm not sure whether it's UP or YAP, but I'm sure you will correct me as the author, which comprises of letters to young professionals. What advice would you give? These days, there's a lot, there are many people young people who are unemployed, some with even master's degrees, some with PhDs. In this month, when we are celebrating youth, what would you advise someone in that position? They have got the papers, but the work is not coming along.
Yeah, it's quite an unfortunate scenario that many of our young people find themselves in. I think there are three key things in life, which is time, skill, and money. And I would urge our young people to consider this. You can use your time and skill to make money, or you can use money and time to get skill. In other words, you need the two of these to get the third one. And for our young people who are qualified, they normally have got the skill, they normally have got the time. So it's an issue of combining your skill and your time to make money. And I would urge them to consider a few things, for example, volunteering. There's so much exposure, experience, and education that one gets by volunteering in organizations that are in line with what you are passionate about or what you have trained to do. I would also urge them to keep looking for opportunities. The fact that opportunities are hard to come by doesn't mean you give up. You keep looking for them. You leverage on social networks, for example, a church in the neighborhood. You leverage on social media, LinkedIn. You eventually get one or two links or opportunities through those avenues. During this time that you are still looking for a good opportunity, you are still not yet employed, consider refining your skills as you seek opportunities. Sometimes there are free online opportunities that one can get. They could be courses, things that can develop your CV. It's important once you refine your skills, you also improve your value and increase your chances of being sought after. It's also important to leverage on mentors. Mentors will widen your network, they'll increase your perspective, and they'll enlarge your exposure because you are dealing with people who are older than you or who are more senior than you in your career. We have got more contacts or bigger contacts. We have got experience that you can learn from. And I'd also urge that young people should read a lot. A young person who reads is way, way more valuable than one who doesn't read. So Dear Yapi is a good starting point to read for a young one. On the pronunciation, we co-authored this with Dr. Farai Maposa. Dr. Farai says Dear Yupi, I say Dear Yapi. So both pronunciations, they work.
Oh, is Dr. Farai the one from the private school?
Yes.
No, that's good. Thank you very much for inspiring the youth that when you have the qualifications, it doesn't mean you just sit there and wait. You can also volunteer your skills. You can look for a mentor. You can leverage on social media instead of just being on social media, scrolling and following some stories that may not really add value. You may as well leverage on that. And what would you say productivity is? We're talking about the youth here. Wow. What's productivity to you?
For me, productivity is being able to do something that produces a result. This may be in terms of what one is doing in their chosen areas they are passionate about, being able to bring positive result through what you are doing. Most of the time, our young people, they are found losing a lot of time on social media. Social media is not bad, but sometimes they're just going through entertaining things that do not leave you productive at the end. These are things that just while up your time. But I think productivity means focusing your time more on things that have a tangible return that they'll give back to you. So it may, if one is in the agricultural sector, productivity is coming back with 100 bags of maize or something. So whichever area one is, being able to focus on programs, initiatives, activities that bring back tangible results. For me, that's productivity.
Oh, thank you very much. I guess the issue is about results because sometimes people tend to confuse being busy and being productive. So
Yes.
I'm sure as you mentioned, it's about the results, not necessarily the effort that shows that you're productive. If the
Yeah.
output is positive, then yeah, there's some productivity there.
Yeah.
Years back when I studied law as a subject, in my bachelor in accounting degree, we're taught that ignorance of the law is not an excuse. And you find many people have paid costly for not knowing the law. What would you say about this? Because sometimes the law is not in the public space. Sometimes you actually know about the law when you've already broken the law. And yeah, you find it sometimes even when you're driving and you meet the police, you realize that sometimes you're being asked to pay for something that you actually didn't know about. So, what would you say, or what would you encourage our audience regarding being ignorant of the law?
My encouragement is for everything in life, there is a law. Whatever you want to do, whatever you're interested in, anything in life, there is a law that regulates it one way or another. There is a law that provides for whatever you're doing. Whether you want to keep bees in your house, whether you want to drive, whether you want to bury a person, everything in life does have a law. So my encouragement is, as much as possible, try to know the law that regulates an area that you interact more with. It's definitely impossible to know the law about everything there is. Even as lawyers, we don't know. However, we specialize or we spend a lot of our time on certain things in life. What we spend more of our time on, I would encourage that you find out the law which regulates that space and make it a point to know before you invest your time, your money, or your heart. It may be a business project or it may be some venture. Before you invest your time, before you invest your money, before you invest your emotions, try to find the law that regulates that area. Unfortunately, our law says ignorance of the law is not a defense. So you can never say, I didn't know. The moment the president signs a law into effect, you are presumed to know the whole law as is. Therefore, the fact that you don't know, unfortunately, won't be a defense. So we have to, as much as possible, make sure we know the law that regulates spaces we are operating in, things that we are doing. And maybe lastly, I would say now and again, you need to have a lawyer on speed dial. You can just run through something that you may not be sure about.
By having a lawyer on this speed dial, would you want to expound on that? And is there situations where maybe a client comes to you and they have paid, then you realize you don't know, because you've just mentioned that as lawyers, you don't know everything. How does that work? Do you tell a client upfront that you don't know? Or like maybe sometimes you when when they've presented their case, you think you know. Then in the process, you realize you don't know something. Do you like pay back a client? Do you refer them to someone else? What's the process?
Okay, on speed dial, what I meant, every person, one way or another, you may know a lawyer that is close to you. You need to have at least the contacts of one or two lawyers whom you can easily communicate with should you want to find out information or the law about something. Now, in terms of things that we don't know and clients who come, we are obliged to be upfront and tell them what you don't know and what you know. I've had several times when clients come to me on criminal cases, I don't do criminal law myself. I actually told them, this one, I can refer you to my colleague so and so. You will do a better job than me on this. On things that I do that I don't know, I can tell them that I may need to read out a little bit more on this and find out. So I can actually tell them up front that on this one, I am not very sure. I'll just need to confirm. then I can confirm with my colleagues. There are some things that I may not know, but I can easily know and carry them out. Then there are some things that I don't know and I can't do them. So I can rope in another lawyer and we do together. Then there are some things that I have to outrightly pass on to another lawyer and say, I think this one can be done better than me. I've noticed many times that a client would respect me more if I'm clear upfront that I'm sorry, this I can't, but I know who can do it better than me. They know that I'm not after their money, but at least ensuring that they get the best service.
Oh, thank you about that. I think that's helpful. At least people know that as professionals, sometimes you know to a certain extent. I was watching a movie, and a doctor gave a patient a wrong diagnosis, and they had to call the patient later. But the effect that it had on the patient was very serious. So yeah, I like the idea that you say you tell the clients upfront, but sometimes you just want to present that you're the expert. But yeah, so I like the idea of I guess that's integrity, because sometimes if you are the expert in something, it also takes humility to accept that you don't know, or even
Yes.
to refer, because you find that sometimes if you go to an expert, it takes them time to accept or even to refer. That people will take some jobs, then you later see, you were talking about productivity, you later see with the results that they should have maybe prior just told you that they're not very good, or they should have referred. So I like that attitude. At least it promotes integrity. I had someone who thought, let me say who thought, because they only realized later that they were married in community of property, only to learn when the husband passed on that they were married out of community, out of property. What's community out of property? How does that happen? Like someone would be married for years only to realize when someone is passed on that what they probably thought all the property they had was also theirs, and they realized it wasn't like that.
Okay. And unfortunately, those are some of the things I was talking about, that ignorance of the law is not a defense. The law in Zimbabwe, at least I can confirm on Zimbabwe, I'm not sure about South Africa. In Zimbabwe, every marriage since 1930 is out of community of property. It's automatically out of community of property. What it means is that what I own in marriage is mine. What my spouse owns is hers. We can individually own our properties and deal with them as we fit. So it's unfortunate that maybe she discovered later that she was married out of community of property, but that is the default setting. You actually intentionally, before marriage, do paperwork that make or convert your marriage to be in community of property. However, in terms of what happens after death, whether you were married in the community of property or out of community of property, if there was no will, or if there is no will, after death, the wife is the primary beneficiary, whether in or out of community of property. Even if the property was in the name of the husband, the wife is the primary beneficiary and the children. So there shouldn't be much worry, unless maybe if the husband had sort of put the rug from under her feet and pass the property to someone else without her knowledge. Inheritance law is what then kicks in after the death of the husband. So it no longer matters much on the community or out of community of the marriage, because the law then protects the wife. The challenge would be before death, the husband or the spouse may choose to dispose of property in his name, and that can lawfully be done without your knowledge, and once done, unfortunately, it will be done. So the important thing, maybe I can send conclusion on this one, is spouses must agree on how they own their property in marriage and how they handle their property in marriage, how they may dispose of the property, and also what happens post-death.
So prior, you're talking of you said 1930.
Yes, 1930.
But isn't it like people were married in what was in church? What is it? There was like an assumption that it's marriage in community of property. So many people would, maybe we're talking about being ignorant of the law. Many people would assume that because you're married, you've got a marriage certificate. We are one flesh. So what belongs to you belongs to me. How does that work? Do you, after, when you're married in church, when you have the marriage certificate, do you then go to the courts for them to confirm that you're in community of property or out of community of property?
Sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
I said many people, there's an assumption, because you mentioned 1930, and some of us were married way after 1930. We were an understanding that if you're married in church and you have a marriage certificate, it's automatic that what's his is yours. So everything belongs to you. So I'm asking that, so do you mean that those who have got marriage certificates, like maybe the Christian, I'm not sure how the Muslims do it, they still have to go to the court for them to correct or to confirm that this is marriage in community of property or out of?
Okay. We have the law of the church, which is not necessarily the law of the land. So in church, we believe that once joined together, we are one flesh, everything we do together. So we are being bound by the law of, should I say, the law of Christ or the law of our faith. But that does not translate into the law of the land. So legally, you still remain married out of community of property, even though as spouses you are doing things together and you believe that you are in community of property practically. So I can say we are practically in community of property because we are doing things together with my spouse, everything we do together. But legally, we still remain out of community of property. So whether the wedding or the marriage was a court wedding, it was done at church, or it was done kwasabuku at the headman's, or wherever it was done, as long as it was a marriage registered in Zimbabwe, it is out of community of property, unless the parties have intentionally done paperwork to make it in community of property.
Oh, thank you. I hope someone is informed there. When you spoke about that the courts support the wife, if I got you correctly, I heard of a couple whom the husband put on the will his brother, and not the wife. And on the wife also just knew when the husband had passed on that the brother, everything then belonged to the brother, because I'm sure because of the ignorance of the law, they also just assumed that the law of the church was taking effect. In that scenario, how is there any way, let's say if the brother refuses to work with the sister-in-law, how does the court go about it? Because with that woman, she actually had to start all over. Unfortunately, she was also a stay-at-home mom, and she had to start, she really suffered that period where she was studying, she had to go back to study, top up, have a PhD, start all over. But that period, uh, the family suffered, but because the husband had put the brother on the wheel. How does that work?
Yeah,
From
that's
what?
it's quite a difficult one. Um, the law, unfortunately, does not do much with the feelings and emotions. It just says A or B, C or D. As long as the property is in my name, I have the freedom to do a will and state what I want to happen to my property. So the wife in that case has got a challenge. What she could do would be to, being a stay-at-home mom and not employed, she could have applied for maintenance from the estate. That, okay, whilst I'm not getting any inheritance, but I'm entitled to maintenance as the surviving spouse. So she could get a lump sum payment from the estate, which is calculated depending with individual circumstances, which could help someone to start from there. I think that's the best bet. Yeah, lump sum maintenance. But otherwise, if the husband had already willed that the property goes to his brother, then it's a challenge, which makes it mandatory for spouses during the course of the marriage to agree on how they own the property and what happens to the property after either party dies, and to have it in writing especially.
So the writing, is that the will, or you can just write a document? There's special document that the couples have to write to agree.
Okay, firstly, it can be the will, or it can be a family trust that transfers property from either of the spouses into a family trust that will be there for the benefit of the whole family, that is the spouses and their children, their grandchildren going down the line. Those would be better. We would rather have legal documents that can be used in courts, that can stand on their own and be able to give the relief that the surviving spouse desires. So it's not always the wives. Maybe they've been the bigger number in terms of being victims, but it can be the husband. So we always look at it as a surviving spouse more than the widow.
Thank you for that clarification. Sevi says, yo, didn't know we still need to do something else. I think I'm also with her there. I also just thought, I think I aligned more to the church law than the law of the land.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you for that clarification. I think I was going to ask of a woman who divorced and realized that the house was in the husband's name, and she was going to walk away with clothes. I think you've touched on that already.
Mhm.
Yes. Many people have found
Maybe
themselves.
I can just
Yes.
say something on that one where you're saying the woman who divorced.
Mm.
On divorce, the dynamics are a little bit different. If I have property in my name only and I divorce with my wife, the wife does not go empty-handed. The court has got a discretion at the point of divorce to divide the property between both parties. So the court can actually say this property, which is in the husband's name, must move to the wife's name, or vice versa. So on divorce, a spouse does not necessarily walk away with nothing just because property is not in his or her name. They agree. If they don't agree, the court will decide for them. So it's a bit of a different scenario if it is divorce or if it is death. I thought maybe I can just clarify on that one.
Oh, thank you for the clarification. So if how then does the community out of property? I thought you said community out of property. It means the person who maybe owns the property does whatever they want. So if it's in their name and they are married in community out of property, how then does how does the sharing happen? Because it's his property.
Okay.
And if you're married in community, in property, and you have not signed the document of agreement, as you said, it still means that the person can decide what they want to do with their own property.
Yes, property is my own. I decide what I want to do with it. But the dynamics change on death and on divorce. On death, if there's no will, the surviving spouse takes it up and the children. If there's a will and the will is valid, then what the will says goes. On divorce, the court says parties must live as close as possible to the life they were living before they divorced. Why the court decides to share the property, even though it was in one spouse's name, is that sometimes it was in your spouse's name, but the acquisition of that property was a joint effort. Maybe we contributed differently, somebody 40%, somebody 60%, but to be put in one person's name because it was a mortgage bond, which was coming from the employer, and those dynamics were at play. So the court then considers how long the marriage has survived. The court considers the levels of contribution by either party, and then the court will see which is a better way of sharing. Sometimes the court will also consider if there are children who are under 18, how many there are, and who's going to stay with the children. So if the mother is going to stay with the children, 3 of them, 6, 7, 8 years old, the court may also be inclined to let the spouse who is keeping the children retain a significant share of their house, even if it was not in their name.
Oh, thank you for that, Mr. Musendo. Many people have found themselves in trouble because they signed documents without reading the fine lines. Contracts have so much wording that it takes diligence to sit and read through, even when buying assets. What's your advice on this? I'm sure many people would be would agree with me that sitting down to read contracts, whether it's when you've got an asset or you need to agree, even in business. I don't know why they make it the language. I'm trying to avoid the word boring, but
Yes, it's actually boring. Yeah. There's a law in, we call it contract law. It says caveat subscriptum. In other words, it's saying let the signer beware. The person who is signing, before signing, must be very careful. We sign contracts. There may be contracts of employment, there may be contracts of purchasing things, or different types of contracts. One must always insist on reading and understanding before they sign. One must always insist, if necessary, to get time to go and confirm or to go and consult. You may actually go to a lawyer or to someone who can help you to understand. Because once you sign, you will be in trouble if things come up differently from what you thought. In Zimbabwe, we've had several issues with football players because they will just sign without understanding what it means. So would you have a player signing for this club and for another club, and we have two clubs fighting for a player, and the player is stopped from playing for a while. It affects their career ultimately. We've also had serious problems. Now maybe it's not as much before, where musicians would sign to record their music with the grammar. Then they go again and sign to record with another recording studio. And we then have running battles. I remember in the 90s, there was quite a big fight for Simon Chimbeto. I think his album was called Lullaby or Survivor. I'm no longer sure. But there was a huge fight. There was a huge fight between two recording studios because of that. Reason being, people would have signed without reading and understanding the consequences. So my encouragement is don't sign before you read. Don't sign before you understand. If you can't understand, consult and then sign later. People can say, I know, don't worry about it. Chingo signer will always change later on. Once you sign, sometimes it says what is written is the only thing. What's not written is not considered. So insist on reading and understanding before you sign.
I thank you for that. I was just thinking that many like small businesses, they employ people and they don't sign. They don't sign any contracts because they want to protect themselves, especially, it could be issues that they're not sure whether the business will work. So at least if there's no contract, you can negotiate the salaries. And they're talking about like musicians. How would you do it legally? You have been employed. Yeah, maybe you have a business and you just employ someone maybe someone from church, and they don't insist on signing a contract. But then on the way, there are issues, or maybe you fail to pay them, or they have some issues. Can they go to a lawyer, or because there's no signed contract, the lawyer cannot help?
They can always go to a lawyer. There can always be a way around it. For issues such as employment, the law has been adjusted such that a person who is employed without an employment contract still is considered to be employed. And there are certain minimum conditions that would apply. It also depends with the trade they are in. Different trades have got certain regulatory bodies. For example, it may be the clothing and textiles industries. There are trade unions and national employment councils that regulate. This is for Zimbabwe. If somebody's in the education sector, different sectors. So even if there is no written contract, there are ways that one can be protected. There are ways that one can eventually get assistance. Though I would insist that as much as possible, there has to be a contract, even if it's going to indicate that this is a contract for 3 months. It will always avoid misunderstandings later on, because the contract will be clear how you are going to be working, how you are going to be paid, your specific duties and things that you're supposed to deliver. So I would urge the employer, it's safer for the employer to have a written contract. The employee is also safe to have a written contract. As much as possible, it will save hassles later on. If there was no written contract, we can still start having a written contract from whatever point you decide to have, which can then factor in even the time that one is worked without a contract.
Oh, thank you very much for that highlight, because sometimes, when they're desperate for employment, we're talking about youths looking for work. Sometimes if you're desperate for employment, for you to ask the employer for a contract, maybe yet they've actually given you an opportunity, you may feel like you're stretching it. And sometimes it's not clear. The employer doesn't like make it clear when the contract will come. So because you're desperate for work, you just You just get by. Hope Nyamande here is saying it's very important to read before you sign, but those contracts sometimes they have lots of pages. So I yeah,
I get that's why we then need the lawyer to go through all those pages for you. Then you can just summarize in a few words what those pages are saying. Because yeah, I really agree. A lot of those pages can be very frustrating and boring, and the language. Sometimes Latin phrases are also included there, which makes it even worse. So you may then have to get a lawyer to just run through something and assist you.
so do the lawyers charge to read the contract?
Lawyers don't charge for anything except their time. So they charge for the time they spend doing something.
So
Otherwise,
if
everything
they're
that
reading
we
the
do, we
contract,
don't
you pay
charge.
for the time.
Yeah, it's the time, really, yes. But those things are always regulated. Our regulating body has got structures and systems in place for how one is supposed to charge. And then also sometimes people can get discussions with individual lawyers and have a certain understanding of how this can be done. Alternatively, one can try artificial intelligence to interpret for them, though it's something that is not yet properly tried and tested for many of us this side of the world.
Oh, is it? Because I've had people with challenges for when AI has not interpreted. I actually read somewhere where they said never use AI or ChatGPT to consult on law issues because it's not reliable.
Yeah, it's good for general information. As an informational, that's okay. But for specific legal assistance, I'd rather we deal with a physical lawyer than to deal with artificial intelligence in its various forms. Because the context within which it has been programmed and our context are quite different. So certain words are understood differently because of our context. So it ends up leaving in a difficult position because of the different interpretation. I wouldn't want to say wrong interpretation. I would say different because of the programming.
Oh, thank you very much. Many dreams have been aborted because of lack of money. I know you have mentioned that you're not a criminal lawyer, but they say if you have money, you will not go to prison. Some try to even represent themselves. Even I know of people who try to represent themselves when their properties are being repossessed or they're fighting with the bank not to repossess their properties. Are there like options where if you don't have money, but you desire to win a court case, where maybe the law can help? I know there's some lawyers who do pro bono, but there's also a question that if someone is doing pro bono, do they do the work? Are they as committed as someone has been paid, rather?
Okay, I'd start by saying prison is meant for criminal offenders, whether rich or poor. Prison is supposed to be for criminal offenders. However, the dynamics of this world always favor the rich. And the rich, they can afford lawyers. They sometimes can use their money to bribe their way out of situations. Those are the dynamics of the world that we live in today, unfortunately. My advice, firstly, avoid crime. That's the best way. And when life happens, there are also free legal service providers. There are some who are from government, from non-government organizations. Those you can approach. It's better to approach a free legal service provider who may work half-heartedly than not to engage at all. Generally, a lot of these people, it depends with how you then interact with them. They can be very, very helpful. It's not all cases that one can say they were working half-heartedly. I've seen many where the effort being put by the lawyer doing something pro bono is much more than what I'm putting as a paid lawyer. So I would not want to discourage someone and say, when you go there, they won't put their work, they won't put their heart or mind into it. They will. If you are not satisfied, you can then raise concerns or think differently. But a lot of us now, we do have one or two lawyers we know. And sometimes you can just check on them for something without necessarily incurring costs. Or you can try to find ways of them assisting you in an arrangement that can help you to get the service, but without robbing the bank from your part.
Seth is asking, can you help us with will writing? How much do you charge? How long does it take to write a will?
Yes, as lawyers, we can assist on will writing. The cost, they always vary. It depends with what is involved with the will, it depends with the amounts of properties and several minor nitty-gritties that are involved there. So I may not be able to publicly state the amount now because of those variances. It doesn't take time. It can be done in a day, it can be done in 2 days, it can be done in 3 days. It now depends with um, how fast one wants it and how much material and information one has got. Sometimes a will has taken me a bit of time because the person who was asking me to prepare the will didn't know some of the final details we wanted. For example, I say, okay, can you give me information about your property? They just know that my property is number 7 in Mtamba Road, Warren Park. They don't know anything beyond that. So sometimes it takes time because you'll be waiting for that information. But where all the information is available, then it doesn't take time. It's a day's job or 2 days job.
Thank you. I hope Sevi has been answered. From a law point of view, what is domestic violence? Many people don't trust the justice system because they think that the prison does not transform perpetrators, and also some perpetrators who can pay or bribe get away without even going to prison. What's your take on that?
Okay, my take on domestic violence. There's a Domestic Violence Act in Zimbabwe that also regulates this and that defines domestic violence even in more detail. But generally, it is the infliction of pain in a domestic setting by one family member against another family member. It can be a father to a child, it can be a wife to a husband. It's something that is happening in a domestic setup. That's why we call it domestic violence. So it's the infliction of pain, which can be physical pain, it can be mental pain, it can be emotional pain. There are now different ways that people can inflict pain or injury on a person. But it normally manifests itself in physical pain or physical injury. But it's not just physical. So once it happens in a domestic violence, in a domestic context, we then say it's domestic violence.
And what do you think? Does the justice system deal with this fairly from your experience?
In Zimbabwe, you can be imprisoned for up to 5 years or more, depending with the levels of the violence. There is definitely provision for that. The challenge that we have are the dynamics of relationships involved because it's a domestic setup. So it's hard for a child to report on the parent who is paying their school fees, who is responsible for their survival. So they end up reporting today and tomorrow they withdraw charges because the father says, if you keep like that, well, it will remain like that. Or you get a wife who ends up withdrawing charges against the husband because she loves him. So for me, the complications arising out of the relationships is what makes it difficult to enforce. But our law does have enough provision for domestic violence. It starts with like what you call a peace order, uh, an order that stops a person from inflicting pain in whatever form, physical or emotional. And then if that is not respected, then more penalties are available. I just wish we had ways for the general person to navigate around the complex relationship scenarios that then make it difficult for people to enforce or to report.
Yeah, I hear you on the issue of the complication of the relationships, because sometimes people go to the police because they're still emotional about the situation. Then when they are sober, they realize that maybe the man is the sole provider. So if he goes to prison, then there won't be provision. So that's why many people then end up maybe withdrawing the cases. Though we wish there was really a way where, you know, they, besides just giving people peace orders, and there could be a way the law and the community would come together and they would find a solution, rather than maybe, because sometimes when someone is given a peace order, as soon as they leave the police, they just throw that thing away and they go back to their ways. So yeah, I hear you on that challenge, where I can also imagine, even as a parent, if the child goes to the police to report and they still need school fees, I think it's quite a challenge, and that's a hindrance to reducing domestic violence. But I hope as we go along, a solution will be found whereby there's some confidence, or when someone comes to the police, they feel confident that their issue will be dealt, because domestic violence continues to take out people, and many people have lost lives. Some have lost their dreams, and yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a solution where that can be managed. But thank you very much for that contribution. And you are an author. Tell us about your books and where people can get them. And you're also a speaker. Do you want to also tell us more about your speaking and how do people book you for your speaking engagement? And if also people want your law services, someone was asking about whether you can do wills. Maybe the other people also want to know where they can find you, and what would be your closing remarks?
Okay, thank you so much for that. Where I can be found, I am very much alive on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. My name's Patony Musendo. If one searches them, you always find me there. I am available in Harare. My phone numbers, my addresses, those are things I can always share. I am very accessible to get. I've written 2 books. One is called The Immaculate Calling. That was about 10, 11 years ago. It spoke on the issues of leadership in church and some of the abuses people go through some religious leaders. The other one is Dear Yapi, which I co-authored with Dr. Farai 3 years ago. Dear Yapi is available on Amazon. Both of them, they are available as hard copies. We have had several distributors in Zimbabwe, South Africa, UK, and US, and also Australia. So if somebody needs a book, depending with where they are, normally they can contact me or Dr. Farai. We make arrangements for dispatching the books to where they are. We have not done much in terms of the bookshops. We've had some discussions with some food outlets for our books to be sold through there. A lot of our young people now spend more time in food outlets than in bookshops. So we'll catch them there. As a speaker, I'm very available. Depending with location, times, I'm available for booking engagements, speaking engagements. It always depends with the nature of the engagement and the context. So I cannot say I'll charge this amount. It always depends with the nature and the context. But as an author, I'm available to distribute my books. As a speaker, I'm available to meet and to share. As a lawyer, I'm also available to assist. I do assist quite a lot, even some people pro bono, especially the older folks and sometimes the very young ones. I do assist. Where I can't, I also know those who can assist without charging. So in conclusion, I would say know the law as much as possible, or know someone who knows the law, then they can know and help you on your behalf.
Thank you. Before we conclude, there's a question here from Sevi. Have you dealt with domestic violence issues from a Christian home?
I have, and actually it was an apostle, a pastor of a church and his wife. They were actually having serious issues to the extent of sometimes going physical. And how I tried to look at it, the other party, that's the apostle, I was engaged by the wife. So I managed to get to know the lawyer for the husband, and we spoke as lawyers, and we agreed that we don't really need to be fighting in court for this. What we need is a culture change and a character change. So we engaged the husband and we spoke as brothers, and we tried to find ways to deal with it. And I was quite glad that after our conversations, there was quite some change. I haven't been able to know how things have been positive some years now, but I've heard some of those cases. So for me, on issues to do with domestic violence, I try to approach the character and the culture issues more than just the legal provisions. Because a person may be having temper issues. You don't deal with temper issues just by getting someone arrested, but trying to find ways that can address character and culture issues in a person.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. Instead of imprisoning someone because of a high temper or character flaw, they may actually need counseling, if I'm understanding you well, or maybe some therapy. Sometimes people are abusive because they have childhood issues, traumas that have not been dealt with. And I'm sure as you mentioned that domestic violence happens even in Christian homes. You are talking of an apostle. So sometimes there's a tendency to think that it's for people who are not believers. So we need to all work on it. You mentioned that you help pro bono for elderly people and young people. Do you have like an age limit?
Well, not exactly an age limit. It's more of a context-based. I help old people in terms, especially old widows, preparing their wills that I can easily do without incurring costs. It may be free consultation or preparing a will. Other things may now require some cost to be incurred. There, I won't be able to then help pro bono through and through. So I will help a lot, especially in terms of initial consultation and helping with the general legal advice. But to say I have a specific age limit, no. There are some people who are younger, but who are really deserving assistance. Then there are others who are much older, but who really do not need help. So I would not be able to put a cap. But I'll just say normally the older people are over 50, 60 years old.
Thank you very much for your time. We really learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience also learned a lot. And to our audience, if you want to engage Mr. Musendo, he has mentioned that he's on social media. Rangarirai Mazikana here is saying, indeed, Gondidashe Patony Musendo is a very good speaker. He came and spoke on our annual youth conference in Buhera as Anglican Diocese of Masvingo Youth Conference. His presentation was one of the best I've ever attended at a youth conference. So there you go, yeah, someone is, you see, so it's good to have some references there. So thank you, Rangari Rai. So if you want to engage Patton for your speaking engagement, he also mentioned that you can contact him via his social media, and he will give you more details of where you can find him. Thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. I hope you have learned something and you will implement. If you want to contact us, you can write us an email on tafazwamazibukospeaks.co.za, or you can also visit our website on www.tafazwamazibukospeaks.co.za. Thank you again. Enjoy the long weekend to those who are in South Africa, and enjoy the Youth Day. Your dream is worth fighting for. Let's dream and grow together. Cheers. Thank you.